to your peeps.
Well, if you haven't heard enough, now it's time for Graham to come up and to hear your IPOC report now he's reviewing our projects. We reviewed for you really a system in production. So Chris and Graham will talk about the various projects and
All right, we're on item
This
number
has been a
13,
day
business
of-
renew oversight.
it's like being in the U.S. Senate. It's all about technology management discussions today and all that kind of stuff. So.
Jack, don't even go there.
But in a good way.
There you go. That's a
In a
better.
good way.
That's a better
I
way
didn't
to
mean
put
it that way.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone.
Hi.
Hi. So I'm here to present our regular monthly assessment of the active Business Direct project, so Business Direct, Pension Solution, and Data Prep. I want to start with Business Direct, but there are two things I want to talk about this month related to Business Direct. The first is how the activities around the project are progressing, but before we got there, I wanted to talk a little bit about how project reporting fits in with some of the broader operational measures that we just talked about, as well as maybe a couple of others, and just try and give a little bit of context about, how do you feel confident that you've got a full picture of how things are going around the business functions that are impacted by Business Direct, because there are a number of different types of measures that could be looked at, and it might not be intuitively obvious about how they relate to each other. So that's the first thing I wanted to talk about. So the first thing to recognize is the difference between project activities and operational activities. By definition, a project is something that has a defined start and end. It starts on a certain date, it's projected or scheduled to end at another date, and it's going to produce something that's tangible. Whether it be a new system, a report, a building, whatever it might be, but there are some work products or deliverables that come out of that project. And the project should ideally have some influence or impact on the operations. I mean, that's the business case usually for doing a project, is it will impact your operations in some way, you would hope positively. In contrast, operational reporting or operations, by definition, pretty much go on forever. And usually they work on some kind of cycle. It can be a daily cycle, it can be a weekly cycle, it can be an annual cycle, but these are activities that are ongoing and are really sort of the business of the business. The good thing about operations is usually they are amenable to measuring numbers around certain performance measures that are usually around those kind of cycles as well. And a suggestion is that the kind of things you would want to understand to have a full sense of how well the business functions related to Business Direct are operating is a mixture of those things. You want to understand activities related to projects, where there are project things going on that are going to impact Business Direct and the functions associated with Business Direct. And that may relate to how well they're doing against the schedule, how much money they're spending, what the quality is like, how communications are happening, if there are contract issues, those kinds of activities. But in addition, you'd want to understand a number of different aspects of the operational performance of those business functions. Some of them directly related to the technology, some of them less so. So particular examples I would suggest would be technical performance. So that can involve the actual availability and reliability of the system itself. For anybody who's been following the federal health exchange issues, that the actual availability of the system itself can be a major determinant of whether business gets done. And those are metrics that are being monitored on a regular basis by the project team in terms of the actual availability and reliability issues for the system. In addition, you have the support tickets. So this is to what extent are defects or enhancement requests being entered for resolution, and what is that backlog looking like? Are more defects being registered than are being resolved on a monthly basis? It's a different kind of backlog, and it's again the kind of thing we've talked about a little bit as the stabilization process for Business Direct has gone on, but it's a good indicator of the technical stability of the system. Is whether or not the project team or the support team is able to keep up with notifications of either requests for enhancement to the system or identification of bugs and defects in the system. So those technical performance measures are something I think it's important to understand in addition. User satisfaction is another category that's of value, and often the way people measure that is by surveys. And these can be periodic surveys of users to understand level of ability to use the system, level of general satisfaction with the system, how well they feel able to do their jobs. There's activity that the project team has done related to that relatively recently. And then the final is business operations performance. This is where you get to the operational performance measures, basically the kind of things that Lisa and Robin were talking about just before I came up. These are, if you like, sort of the outcome measures. How are the business functions associated with Business Direct actually accomplishing the business needs for which the system was originally implemented? We've had an opportunity to look at the measures, prior to the draft report being prepared. I think we feel these are the right measures in terms of the specific types of measures that are being presented around procurement and contract activity. They're probably the ones that are most directly impacting the performance of the organization right now. And we did have a few suggestions about probable improvements to the way the information is presented in future months so it can be more useful to you. But our suggestion is that really a combination of the project activity reporting so you can understand those activities that are still ongoing and are not yet complete around the project, plus confirmation about the technical performance of the system, understanding user satisfaction with the system, and then finally this set of operational performance measures that you're now starting to get. As a group, that probably provides you enough information to have a fairly good sense of how well the business is functioning for those business functions that are related directly to Business Direct. And it's, choosing Business Direct here as the topic at hand, but it really applies to anywhere where you've got a major project that is going to, influence the performance of the organization. So exactly the same set of circumstances will apply to Pension Solution in a couple of years' time. As Pension Solution functionality starts to be deployed into production, but you still have project activities going on, you'd want to have a similar set of, sort of a broad dashboard of an understanding of how those project performance measures are mapping against operational measures. So any questions about that in terms of how these things tie to each other?
I do have some. So I'll go with Sharon first, then Paul, and then I'm going to weigh in too. Sharon?
So I just need help, Graham, with, because I look at this slide and my, maybe it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon, but I guess I'm trying to figure out, your role when you come to report to us and then what you just talked about. My understanding is when you originally started coming, that your job is project reporting, that first category, correct?
That's true.
And looking at project performance and looking at all these. And then I know we've given you input over several board meetings, I think. And you're saying that the operational reporting, and like the business performance, like what we just heard from Lisa and from Robin, I'm just trying to understand. I think we've been wrestling a little bit as a board, trying to get a better handle on how to have a little bit more precision and oversight over these different systems we're implementing. Mm-hmm. And so I guess it would help me just to understand, okay, so what's your role? And then what do our staff, like Robin or Lisa or other people, need to do in order for us to get the full picture?
Right.
So will you continue to just do the project reporting and then our staff will provide the operational reporting? Or is that kind of what you're talking about?
Our role is really around all of those activities under the Business Renew umbrella, which are the series of projects that are tasked with, creating new business capabilities, whether it be Business Direct or Pension Solution and so on. Once those things transition into production, and then you've got a series, basically operational business functions, that's no longer within the sphere of Business Renew. That then is a corporate performance measurement question. Is how is CalSTRS as an organization managing its actual operational performance along a number of dimensions, the procurement and contract function being one.
Okay. Maybe I'll let Paul go and I'll think about that a little more.
Well,
Maybe you can
yeah,
hand off to
yeah,
you.
hand off to me. It's the same questions. So, so when you were just talking about operational reporting, you were commenting on the report that was just delivered to us by Robin and Lisa. Okay, so you took a look at that and gave some comments about whether those were reasonable metrics to be reporting to the board? Okay. So Business Direct went live early this year, and we're now in November. And I guess again, I don't think there are alarm bells out there. I mean, as Tom said, this looks like it's going pretty well. But I think the board became kind of recently aware that there were some problems when maybe we didn't think that there were problems. And again, no alarm bells, but still something that was new to us. So I'm trying to understand why we weren't getting operational reporting until 10 months after the implementation, and whether the project reporting could have anticipated some of the operational issues, or should be designed to prevent operational problems. I mean, I just as one board member, until very recently, I didn't make the distinction. I kind of thought that what you were doing for us, or that it wasn't just a matter of good software, but good software only works if the people can actually put it to use. And so, going forward, is there something in your project reporting to us that can help anticipate or avoid the problems that we have seen, or anticipate how we evaluate those things, so that we don't just start getting operational reporting 10 months into the project?
I think it's a good question. I think from looking forward, and particularly, for example, if you look at your pension solution, there's an opportunity to focus perhaps a bit more on understanding ahead of time those specific metrics that are going to be important around sort of the measurement of success, and how those are going to be monitored immediately after implementation. And so some of that data is probably available earlier than it has been in the past. But again, when you get into the deployment implementation process, it's sometimes impossible to even come up with a number for a little while, because of the lack of stability around, you're converting, you're trying to get things running, and at what point do you have a capacity to even measure something that's meaningful? It's probably earlier than 10 months out, but it's probably not on the first month either. So I think there is an opportunity to have probably earlier measurement there, but it's not something that happened in this time around.
So I came up to help you understand what we have been doing, and to take responsibility for not having brought it forward to the extent that should have happened. On the technical performance side, we do have detailed weekly reporting. So we look at the number of inbound and outbound tickets, both from a business direct system support staff perspective as well as from the vendor perspective. And we're not yet at what I would call baseline, but we are moving in the right direction. So the number out is greater than the number in. So again, you're looking for that change in the curve. The same is true in terms of performance. We have had performance issues, and those are now turning the corner through a combination of efforts between technology services and the application tuning. Those kinds of things have happened. We're in the process of doing a survey. I don't know, Paul, that as Graham alludes to, prior to maybe 2 months ago, we would have had the capacity to provide you operational measures. We have been so focused on the steps that it takes to go through each of the cycles that we've had to learn. I don't know that we could have answered your questions. So we went live, we converted, we have been processing those transactions. We had to learn how to close the year end and produce financial statements. I mean, it's just been one of those series of activities that from an operational perspective, what I would say that I did wrong was not manage expectations properly around it. That would be my responsibility, because from the life cycle of a project, as we had discussed in September, we were coming down that effectiveness curve, and maybe now we're turning the corner to go back up. But to add additional burdens to that would have led us to further potential operational deficiencies.
We set priorities, and the financial statements were absolutely had to get done, right? I mean, absolutely, that had to get done, or this would be a very different conversation. So, I mean, there was no doubt the organization was tuned to getting those statements done.
I mean, I think I'm not, it may well be that sort of some systematized metric reporting might not have been available in a meaningful way until a few months ago, but I think we identified some bottlenecks, some places where things weren't working, so that, long before 2 months ago, but I don't think we were hearing about that. And maybe, I just think we, and so I mean, I think part of it is a request to Graham as advisor to us. I understand you're working on the project, not the operating. I have a hard time
Yeah.
drawing up, a really sharp line between the two, and it seems to me that there's it's a little bit of a fuzzy line at the transition period, and maybe we can think about how you can help us as a board understand that process.
Yeah, well, I think you're absolutely right. It is a fuzzy line. I mean, in that period where you have a piece of the system live, but it's not all done, it becomes almost a judgment call in a certain way. I think the training activities that are going on right now, like the new training program, in one sense, that's really sort of operational activity in terms of, remedial training for the staff. We're considering a project activity though, because it's a start, finish. It's got a set of deliverables. But that's something that could, be looked at either way. It's not a clean answer, but I think your point about, how to anticipate these issues and make sure that you're getting, the necessary information to feel you're fully informed about what's going on. It's a challenge, especially when there's so much going on in one part of the project, one part of the activity that it's drawing a lot of attention. But it's part of what your challenge is to see the whole waterfront.
So then, Graham, would it be fair to say that as we're moving forward, we're working on what's happened in the past, but moving forward as we go through the pension solution stuff, as you're doing the project reporting on it, would it be fair to say that if there are starting to be, once things start to move through their phases and you become aware of things, that you can tell us, you guys should be hearing something on this operational side?
Yes, and I think what we certainly can do is, as the project is getting to the point of identifying implementation plans, implementation strategies, in addition to the kind of things we've been talking about, that's some the technical stuff around schedule and cost and things like that. One of the things that we're going to be wanting to talk with the project team is about the operational impact of the particular activity, whatever functionality is being deployed, and how are we going to measure that? And how are you going to measure that, and at what point can you measure that in a meaningful way? Thinking sort of, this sort of structure in place, how are we going to know whether the system is performed technically? How are we going to know whether it's, operational performance is, per expectations? We're not going to be doing those measurements, and it's not even really our role to be sort of independently validating the numbers, but what we can do is help make sure that the framework is in place, so it's sort of thought through prior to going live.
And then we would be informed of that.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Sharon?
Well, I think you kind of articulated, Dana, a little bit of what I think for us, I think we're always looking for you to help us. What are the questions we should be asking?
Exactly.
What do we think about as a board when we don't want to micromanage our staff, we don't want to get into all the details. But sometimes I feel like when I'm hearing the project reporting, I don't feel like it's really telling me a lot about how the system's being implemented. And maybe that's just part of, we just have to hear that everything's moving along. But I think at the end of the day, I think we need to kind of know questions and how to be thinking about, because the project translates into people using it and it applying to our system in some way. And so I guess I know that line is fuzzy. I guess maybe what I'm feeling is needing maybe less time on, I mean, more of a snapshot on the project reporting, and then maybe an allusion to, okay, this is what's happening, business performance, or you working with our staff so that our staff can come up and give us a snapshot on the operational measures or something. Because I guess I feel like I need to get a little more, providing oversight is kind of our role, and I guess when it's just conceptual, or when you're just talking about the general project, it's unless it's applied, like you were saying, Paul, unless it's sort of how it's operating in our system, it doesn't, I don't know, it's hard for me to.
I guess the one point I'd
evaluate.
make to that, and I'll pass over to Peggy, is it also depends. I mean, if you think about board oversight of these large projects and about risk mitigation, and how do you measure success? The position we're in right now is talking about a system that went live, and yes, it was later than originally scheduled, but didn't really cost that much. But in terms of hard dollars than was originally anticipated, it's having some challenges in terms of meeting, performance metrics, but it is working. That's sort of, how do you measure success? You compare that to some of the other projects that are, out there that people have heard about that never got that far. And so really if you think about part of what our role is, as I'm particularly thinking of the pension solution, is to be looking for the things that will potentially prevent the project even getting to that point. And those are the things that we can hope to bring to your attention around risks to the actual deployment at all. Never mind whether it gets to be successfully performing per set of performance metrics you would establish, but there are things going on in the project that might actually prevent it ever going live in the first place, and being cancelled, or because those things do happen.
Sure.
And that's part of our role, is to bring, and that's why the project stuff is important, and it becomes, I could say it becomes more relevant the higher the project is at risk of failing. If the project's generally going along okay, it can seem less and less relevant. At the point that the project is, oh my God, is this going to get canceled? All of a sudden, it's very, very relevant. And so that's, trying to put it in perspective, there's a couple of different objectives we're trying to get to. And so particularly when we're looking at pension solution, as we're going through that whole process with the procurement and then through the implementation, my job is to make sure that you're alerted to anything that's got an existential threat to the project, or a significant potential that it won't be deployed at all. In addition to those other things around, okay, we'll get past that hurdle. How is it going to perform from an operational perspective? So, how relevant and of interest those items are depends somewhat about how well the project is actually doing. I hope that makes sense.
Peggy?
So I just want to point out that we're starting with the Pension Solution Project. We're starting from a very different premise, because we have a set of robust and regularly reviewed service objectives. And we didn't have those in a way that were shared with you for the Business Direct implementation. You didn't have a regular report that told you the volumes, the transactions, the timing, and those kinds of things that we're able to pull out of the system today. So we've moved far ahead in that regard. But remember that you do have quarterly reports that are put on your website and on the .com website on our performance relative to service objectives. If we see those service objectives starting to slide, then or take a very deep change as a result of an implementation of a phase, then you know that we have an intersection between operational reporting and project, or between the operations and the project.
Right.
So I think we have a different way of helping you see where problems might be emerging, because that data is more readily available to you, and it's discussed internally on a quarterly basis with all of the senior leaders in terms of actual performance of the system. So the two pieces kind of go together. What Graham is talking about is really things that threaten the project's viability and ongoing completion. And then on the operational reporting side, we're seeing, is there an impact on member services? And so we just have a different perspective at the starting gate, and then a way to monitor and see that activity that hasn't been always visible to you in the past on the business direct side.
Oh, and we've learned from Business Direct, absolutely. I'm just, I understand your point about the quarterly reports, but if it starts to slide, instead of being surprised when we read the quarterly reports, it would be really great to be notified prior to that. So, and I'm sure, and what we've learned from this is I'm sure we'll go there.
Right, and I think that we can commit as an organization, providing you with the information that you need in order to feel comfortable that the production activity of the organization is matching the project reporting activity that you're receiving from our Business Renew office as validated by or commented on by our independent consultant. So I think you'll have more data points to help your comfort level about things that are changing. Because that's really what we want, is for you to feel like you're informed about what's going on. And there may be times in the implementation where we anticipate that there will be a dip in production because of something, but we should be able to anticipate that and plan for it and prepare you, and perhaps prepare our membership for it as well.
That's a good idea.
As part of our, when we get ready to do releases in the future for Pension Solution, one of the risks that the projects always look at is what is the risk to operations if we go live with this release. So that's one of the things that we will make sure to report on. These are the risks we were discussed. This is the mitigation factors that we've taken into account before we actually go live. So you'll know that before we actually go live with any releases in the future.
Tom?
Okay, well, I appreciate all the information we're getting, and I think this has come to our attention because there were some surprises that affected what seems to be the most critical functions of the fund. Can we pay benefits on time? Can we conduct our investment business as as the investment professionals want to? Otherwise, my reaction is, at the board level, this great level of detail is not something that is necessarily appropriate. I mean, I think what we'd be looking to Graham to do to tell us is, hey, the system, either because on a project level or on an operational level, has some faults, and mission critical, important business of the fund is at risk. We want to know that. If we're making slightly less progress on full implementation, I can hear that less than every meeting. And I don't really feel like I have to see a report every quarter about how fast transaction processing is progressing, unless there's an aberration from plan. Similarly, with the new large project, we're going to commit a lot of money, and we should have regular oversight to make sure that the project is on track. But I don't think we should be down in the weeds about knowing just exactly how on track it is. Are we 62% there or 81% there? We can drive you crazy with a mind-numbing level of questions if you continue to report to us on a mind-numbing level of detail. I mean, I may be alone in that, but my sense is we're getting down in the weeds a little bit below where the board should be.
I think we've sort of gone back and forth a little bit over the past year or so, but what is that right level of detail? I certainly, take your point that, you have a role in governance, and it's not to be, you're not managing the project. There is, though, I guess, a question, though, of, if the only time I ever come to you is when something's really, really bad, or that, that there's a real threat here, how much context do you have to that, what's been happening? So I think there's value to an ongoing presentation of just status, if nothing else, about this is where things are. And so, but, you're right in terms of the level of information being appropriate to the role, but keeping you at least informed of sort of where things are, not taking a lot of time necessarily, but just so that if I do come and say, look, we've got an issue here,
Yeah.
we need to discuss, it's not, okay, we need to be educated on what this project's about or where are we.
Right, no, I get that, and it was important that we dig in,
Yeah.
because as it surfaced, it seemed like, at least one part of the organization was terribly unhappy and, about how things were going, and we didn't know it. And so if that occurs, we'd like to know early, but I'd say we can, having heard all the progress being made, at least from my perspective, we can retreat to the more normal
The
board
higher
level
level
of,
again,
more normal board level of review, as long as we know that the mission-critical functions of the fund are being done in a timely way.
Well, as a practical matter, if you look at the next several months, the Business Direct project work is almost done. I mean, there's only a few months left, and it should all be complete, excepting Release 2, which is not started yet. The pension solution will be in procurement phase, and there's only so much you can say during an active procurement about what's going on. So by nature, there's going to be a limited amount of information over the next few months. Once a contract is awarded for the pension solution, I mean, that's an order of magnitude bigger than CALM, the Business Direct project was, both in size and complexity. So, we may have to re-engage about what's the right level of information there to make sure you feel, adequately informed about what's going on, because it'll be very big, it'll be very complicated,
Yeah.
a lot of moving parts.
That'll be good. Thank you, Graham. Sure.
That was going to be my suggestion, because I agree with you, Tom. I feel like this has been more of a request in reaction to what's gone on. I certainly think moving forward, even closing out, Business Direct, I don't know if Lisa or Robin, if there's going to be another report or something at some point, or an update, but certainly don't think we need that every time. And I certainly think going on to, pension solutions, I think what you're hearing from the board is, we want to hear when there's a problem or when there's an issue, whether it's from you or from our staff, when it is apparent, but other than that, I agree with you, Tom. I don't think we have to, I think we can go back up to the 30,000 view. I just think, and hopefully we learn from this experience moving forward, so.
Now you can move off your first slide.
Okay. Well, with that,
Thank you, Graham.
with that message in mind, I won't belabor the rest of this material. I do want to make a few points about Business Direct and then pension, then data prep. So Business Direct, firstly, just repeat what I said, it's almost done. So Release 1.5 and Release 1. Release 1, which is the original, deployed functionality, there are a set of closeout deliverables that are still not complete. Most of them should be done by the end of this month. There will be a few hanging out there, but won't be too much longer. Release 1.5, which if you remember was the functionality that was deferred and mostly reports, but some other items. Most of that will be complete by the end of this month. However, there are some items related to procurement and contracts reporting that were intended to be complete at the end of this month. They hit some design issues. Those are probably not going to be complete until February at this stage. So that will end up dragging out beyond New Year. The only additional thing I would say in terms of areas of watch or concern is around the new training strategy, which we're in favor of the approach. I think it's a good thing. There is an approach that's been agreed to, but no timeline or plan for the training at this point. So we don't understand what the timeline is or what the sequence of courses. And without understanding that, it's difficult to understand how that matches into the operational impacts and the prioritization of which classes are most needed and when people are actually going to get trained. So that's really what we're going to be looking for in the closeout phase, in addition to sort of monitoring the closeout of the rest of the project activities, is that plan for the training and how does it line up with those measures and the business needs, how people feel they need additional training beyond what they've had so far. Any other questions on BD? No. All right, so let's move to pension. The relevant information for pension, the RFP will be out before Thanksgiving, unless something unexpected occurs. So I think that's a significant accomplishment on its own. We had some concerns, the last couple of months about the ability of the organization to come together and actually work through a very, very complex procurement and come together with an RFP that everybody had reviewed and were, willing to sign off on, but it's happened. So the RFP should be posted very soon, and the organization is to be congratulated in that.
If I could just add to the board for their own, we will send you an email when the RFP hits the street, and there is no doubt it will be out before Thanksgiving. And that officially begins your no contact period on this very important RFP, and you could even begin that now in abundance of caution, but officially it begins real shortly. So I'll make sure each of you get an email from us knowing that in case you're contacted by prospective vendors. And this is such a long procurement that no contact period is going to be unusually long for this market. So thank you.
I would say from our perspective, we feel that the procurement approach that's being taken in the RFP is it's a pretty good one. I think if you're paying attention, you'll have seen a lot of information in the press about various challenged public sector IT projects, whether at the federal level or at the state and local level. There's all sorts of different reasons why these projects have problems, but in many cases, the problems are rooted in the way that the procurement was done. A couple of common root causes that we see. One of the biggest ones is simply a misunderstanding by the vendor community of how big and complex the implementation is. So they either put the wrong people on it, they have a wrong approach, they underestimate the time, they underestimate the cost. And you see those, kind of issues bubble up in a number of the things that, if you read the papers, you've seen recently. The project is trying to address some of that head on by structuring a procurement strategy that is intended to provide, opportunities to educate the vendor community and to hopefully have responsive RFPs that, really understand the size and complexity of the project at hand. Another contributory factor to projects having challenges is lack of discipline about project management. Just applying the rigor of the tools around, schedule management, risk and issue management, and so on. And that, again, is something where I think the project is starting to put in place a culture and a set of discipline around those practices that once a vendor comes in, they'll have to step into an environment that's already working in that manner, and that should support a greater likelihood of success for the project. So altogether, we feel, we'll see how it plays out, but we feel pretty confident that at this point, the procurement strategy they're taking is a good one. So, any questions on pension?
Nope.
Okay. And finally, on data preparation, so remember this project is really, as much as anything, a support project to the pension solution project. It's running slightly behind schedule, but the thing that they're starting to work into now is some of the complex data analysis issues. And as we've talked to you previously, our main sort of litmus test for this project is whether the problems that they're trying to address are problems that the pension solution would have to address if they didn't. Is this work going to be a real contributor to a smoother data conversion and a smoother transition for pension solution? To date, I think we'd say the answer to that is yes. The analysis they're doing is very relevant, and if it continues on the path it is, it will most likely make the conversion process for pension solution quite a bit easier than it would have been otherwise. So, any questions on data prep?
Nope.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much.